Hello and welcome to today's video lecture of Object-Oriented Programming using Java with the paper code CS504A. Myself Shayoni Chandra, Assistant Professor of Department of Computer Science and Engineering of Guru Nanak Institute of Technology. So let's look at today's lecture contents. So today we will be learning difference between JDK, JRE and JVM, Java Virtual Machine Architecture, details of variables and data types. So let's first understand what are the differences between JDK, JRE and JVM. We have already discussed about JDK, JRE and JVM a little bit. So today we will be discussing the difference between all these three in detail. So before proceeding further into Java, we must first understand the differences between these three. So let's first understand what is JVM. JVM or Java Virtual Machine is an abstract machine. It is called a virtual machine because it doesn't physically exist. It is a specification that provides a runtime environment in which Java bytecodes are executed. It can also run those programs which are written in other languages and compiled to Java bytecode. JVMs are available for many hardware and software platforms. JVM, JRE, and JDK, all these three are platform dependent because the configuration of each operating system is different from each other. However, we know that Java is platform independent. Now, why Java is platform independent and why JVM, JRE, and JDK are platform dependent, that I have already discussed in previous lecture. There are three notions of the JVM, which are specification, implementation, and instance. We have already discussed in our previous lecture that the functions or tasks that a JVM can perform are loading the code, which is done by the class loader, then verifying the bytecode, which is done by the bytecode verifier, then by providing the runtime environment, executing the code, and showing or displaying it on the hardware or on the screen. The next topic that we will be discussing is JRE. JRE is an acronym for Java Runtime Environment. It is also written as Java RTE. Java Runtime Environment is a set of software tools which are used for developing Java applications. It is used to provide the runtime environment. It is the implementation of JVM. It physically exists. It contains a set of libraries plus other files that JVM uses at runtime. The implementation of JVM is also actively released by other companies besides Sun Microsystems. Here in the left side picture, we can see the picture of JRE. This is the Java runtime environment where we can see that the JVM is inside the JRE. That means by using the JRE or the runtime environment, JVM can interpret the bytecode or the .class file inside which the bytecodes are there, and by interpreting the bytecodes, this JVM can display the output on screen or monitor or any hardware. So in order to display the output or in order to execute a bytecode or .class file, this JRE is being needed by JVM. That's why the runtime environment should be there. Otherwise, the JVM cannot interpret and cannot execute the program. So in that case, no output will be produced. This JRE actually contains the JVM, and apart from JVM, JRE also contains a set of libraries. Here we can see some libraries, and some other files are also contained in the JRE, which are needed by the JVM in order to execute a .class file. So JRE basically is the container for JVM and some set of libraries and other files which are needed by JVM. The next topic is JDK. JDK is an acronym for Java Development Kit. The Java Development Kit or JDK is a software development environment which is used to develop Java applications and also applets. It physically exists. It contains JRE plus development tools. JDK is an implementation of 3 Java platforms that are being released by Oracle Corporation. The 3 Java platforms are Standard Edition Java Platform, Enterprise Edition Java Platform, and Micro Edition Java Platform. The JDK contains a private Java virtual machine or JVM and a few other resources also, like interpreter or loader, a compiler which is Java-C, an archiver which is jar, a documentation generator which is javadoc, etc. These things are contained in JDK in order to complete the development of a Java application. Here in the right side picture we can see the picture of JDK or Java Development Kit. As we have just told that JDK contains the JRE and some other development tools. Now we have in this picture, we have already told that JRE contains JVM and some set of libraries, and apart from that, some other files also which are being needed by JVM to execute a .class file or bytecodes. So this is the JRE. This part, this left hand side picture is this one, this JRE part. So JDK contains JRE. Along with JRE, it also contains some development tools that are needed by Java in order to develop an application. And those tools are like the compiler that are needed to compile a source code and to produce the bytecode, which is known as Java-C, a documentation generator, which is known as Javadoc, an archiver, which is known as jar, etc. These are the development tools that are very much essential in order to develop a Java application, which are contained in the JDK itself or Java Development Kit. So JVM is the interpreter here. This is a virtual machine that actually doesn't exist. The JVM is contained within JRE. If JRE is not there, JVM cannot execute any bytecode in order to produce some output. So this runtime environment is very much needed in order to do the execution or interpretation by JVM. This JRE is then again contained within the JDK. So JDK basically contains JRE and some development tools, and JRE contains JVM and some libraries and other files. So this is the basic structure of JDK, JRE and JVM, and we have shown you that how JDK, JRE and JVM, all these three are separate concepts from each other. But we have seen that all these three are needed by each other in order to develop a Java application. If anyone is absent, a Java application cannot be built. All these three are very necessary parts in order to build a Java application. The next topic of today's lecture is Java Virtual Machine Architecture or JVM architecture. So we have already told that JVM is an abstract machine. It has no physical existence. It is just a specification that provides the runtime environment in which Java bytecode can be executed. JVMs are available for many hardware and software platforms. That means JVM is platform dependent. That also we have discussed in the previous lecture. Now, before going into the internal architecture of JVM, we must first learn why JVM is known as a specification and implementation and a runtime instance. JVM is basically a specification because Java Virtual Machine works in order to execute the program. But the implementation provider is independent to choose the algorithm. Its implementation has been provided by Oracle and other companies also. Now, JVM is known as an implementation because it provides the runtime environment where the program can execute. And this runtime environment is being provided by JRE or Java Runtime Environment. Now, whenever you write some Java command on command prompt to run the Java class, an instance of JVM is created. That's why Java is also known as a runtime instance. Now we have already told multiple times that JVM performs loading of classes by using class loader, verifying bytecode by using bytecode verifier, and Lastly, it executes the code in order to produce the output on the hardware by providing the runtime environment. Now let us understand the internal architecture of JVM. Here we can see that the first part of the architecture is the class loader. We already know that class loader is a subsystem of JVM which is used to load class files. Whenever we run the Java program, it is loaded first by the class loader. Now there are three types of built-in class loaders in Java. Here in the right hand side, we can see the three types of class loaders, which are Bootstrap class loader, extension class loader, and system class loader. Now let's explain each of these one by one. The first class loader is the Bootstrap class loader, which is the superclass of the extension class loader. Now this Bootstrap class loader loads the rt.jar file, which contains all class files of Java Standard Edition like java.lang package classes, java.net package classes, java.util package classes, java.io package classes, java.sql package classes, etc. The next one is extension class loader. This is the child class loader of the Bootstrap class loader, and this is the parent class loader of the system class loader. It loads the jar files. The last one is system class loader. This is the child class loader of the extension class loader. It loads the class files from class path. By default, the class path is set to current directory. Now, if you want, you can change the class path also by using -cp or -class path switch. It is also known as application class path, class loader. Now, these are the internal class loaders that are being provided by Java. If you want, you can also create your own class loader. For that, you just need to extend the class loader class. So this is all about the class loader part. Now let us go into the memory areas allocated by JVM. That means this part. In this part, we can see that there are 5 components. The first one is class area or method area. The second one is heap. The third one is stack. The fourth one is PC register. And the last one is native method stack. So let's explain each of these one by one. The first one is class area or method area. This thing stores per class structures such as runtime constant pool, field and method data, the code for methods. The next one is heap. It is the runtime data area in which the objects are allocated. So we have told multiple times that whenever we want to create some objects of some classes, we have to allocate some memory. Now, whenever objects are created, the allocated memories are allocated in heap. So this heap will actually provide you the memory area or the runtime data area where the objects will be physically allocated in memory. The next one is stack. Java stack stores frames. It holds local variables and partial results and plays a part in method invocation and return. Each thread has a private JVM stack created at the same time as thread. A new frame is created each time a method is invoked. A frame is destroyed when its method invocation completes. The fourth point is program counter register or PC register. Program counter register or PC register contains the address of the Java virtual machine instruction currently being executed. The last one is native method stack. It contains all the native methods used in the application. The next part that we can see is the execution engine. This execution engine contains 3 parts: a virtual processor, an interpreter, and just-in-time or JIT compiler. Now this function of the interpreter has been explained in the previous lectures many times. The interpreter actually reads the bytecode stream in order to execute the instructions and to produce the output that can be shown on screen. Now, what is the function of this just-in-time or JIT compiler? This JIT compiler is used to improve the performance. JIT compiles parts of the bytecode that have similar functionalities at the same time, and hence it reduces the amount of time needed for compilation. Here the term compiler refers to a translator from the instruction set of a Java Virtual Machine or JVM to the instruction set of a specific CPU. This JIT compiler is a very important part of JVM. The last part that we can see here is native method interface or Java native interface. This Java native interface, also known as JNI, is a framework which provides an interface to communicate with another application written in some other languages like C, C++, assembly, etc. Java uses JNI framework to send output to the console or interact with operating system libraries. So this is all about JVM or Java Virtual Machine Architecture. So now let us move on to the concept of variables. Now we have already learned the concept of variables in C or C++ languages. So the same concept applied in C or C++ languages are applied in Java language also. So normally a variable is a container which holds the value while a program is being executed, and a variable is always assigned with a data type. Variable is a name of the memory location, we already know that. Now Java contains three types of variables which are local, instance and static. So there are basically three types of variables: local variable, instance variable and static variable or class variable. So let us discuss about variable in detail. So variable is basically nothing but a name of reserved area allocated in memory. In other words, we can say that it is a name of memory location. So it is a combination of very plus able, that means its value can be changed. So let us look what happens in memory when a variable is being declared in Java. So let us take some memory block first. Suppose this is a block of memory. Now suppose we are taking a particular amount of memory area. This is a particular area in memory, which is a reserved area, and that reservation is done by a variable which contains a value, suppose 10. So in order to reserve this memory space or reserve this memory area as a variable, we have to declare a variable, suppose a. If a is a variable name, then this a should contain the 10 value so that this 10 value can appear inside this memory, reserved memory area. And in order to write down this variable as a, which contains an integer value, it should have a data type associated with it. And the data type can be written like this. This is the type of variable declaration that we have used in C language. The same type of variable declaration is used in Java language also, where at first we write down the data type, then the variable name, and after that we can either write a value or we can just end it here also. So after giving lecture on variable and data types, we will show you how to declare a variable, how to initialize a variable, and how to assign some values into a variable. So we are not going into the details of variable declaration or variable initialization now, because we haven't yet completed our topic of variable and data types. So let's first go back to the topic of variable and the concept of variable. So these are the three types of variables that are there in Java language. The first one is instance variable. Now, instance variable is a variable which is declared inside the class directly, but outside of any method. It is called instance variable because its value is instance specific and is not shared among instances or objects. It cannot be declared as static. So, let us understand what this actually means. Suppose we have taken a class named as class A. So if we declare a variable here, then this A is an instance variable because this A variable is declared directly inside a class. That's why this A is an instance variable, but you cannot write the static keyword before it if it is an instance variable. Now after that, the body of the class is written and the program is completed, suppose. Now we know that we can create objects from a class. Suppose we have created two objects from this class. Suppose OB1 and OB2. We are not going into the detail of how to create objects from a class because we will cover these things whenever we will do some advanced level programs in Java. When we will be doing class and object related programs in Java, then we will show you how to create objects from a class. But as of now, you just think that we have created two objects from this class A. Now, we already told many times that whatever properties or attributes or characteristics are being specified inside a class should be there inside each of the objects of that class. So the behaviors that are being specified inside a class should be there in each of its objects. That means the things that we will specify inside this class body should be there inside each of the objects that we create from this class. So whatever we have specified inside this class is only this variable, and these are the two objects of this class. That means OB1 should also have A and OB2 should also have A. But the value of A that has gone into OB1, the value of A that has gone into OB1 is different from the value of A that has gone into OB2. That's why these variable is known as instance variable because this variable's value is instance specific. Suppose we are giving a value 10 into it. So the value 10 that will go into OB1 is completely different from the value 10 that will go into the object OB2. Here also the value 10 will go, but here also the value 10 will go. But the difference is that the value 10 that will go into OB1 will be completely different from the value 10 that will go into OB2. That means the value of A that is being held by the object OB1 will be completely different from the value of A that is being held by the object OB2. That means the value of A is completely instance specific. So we know that objects are instances of a class. So OB1 is an instance of class A and OB2 is also an instance of class A, and the value of A is instance specific. That means OB1 should have a value of A which should be different from the value of A that is being contained in OB2. And this is the reason why this variable is known as instance variable because its value is instance specific. Now the next variable is local variable. A variable declared inside the body of a method is called local variable. Now you can use this variable only inside that method within which you have declared it, and the other methods in the class don't have any idea about whether that variable exists or not. A local variable cannot be defined with static keyword. Now suppose we have declared another class, say class B, and inside that suppose we have written public static void main, and then string args. Now suppose if I declare a variable here, so this variable a is declared inside the main method. Main is also a method because it is a system defined method, but it is a method. So this variable a is defined within this main method. This variable a is known as a local variable. Why? Because of the reason that whenever you will come out from the main method, this variable will have no existence. That means the scope and lifetime of this variable is contained within this main method block only. If you complete the block here, that means the value of this variable a is contained within this block only. Whenever you are coming out from this block, this variable will have no existence. So this is what we call local variable. So when we will be using user defined methods, then also we will see the uses of local variables. So till now we haven't done any programs using user defined methods. So when we will be doing user defined method programs, we will see how to use local variables, what will be the advantages of using local variables. You will also see that the parameters that we will be using inside a method are also known as local variables in case of Java language. That we will be discussing later when we will discuss a detailed concept of methods. So as of now, you just have the concept of local variable as whatever we are writing inside a method body as a variable, that variable is known as local variable, and its scope and lifetime is contained within the block of the method. So the last variable is static variable or class variable. Suppose we have taken another class, class C. Class variables are also instance variables with a static keyword before it. So here we can see that this A is a class variable because this is normally defined inside a class directly. So we can call it instance variable, but no, we can't call it instance variable because a static keyword is written before it. Whenever you write a static keyword before these type of variables which are directly written inside a class, they are known as static variables or class variables. Now, what is the difference between static variable and class variable? Sorry, static variable and instance variables. The difference is that you can create a single copy of static variable and share it among all the instances of the class. And memory allocation for static variable happens only once when the class is loaded in the memory. And static variables cannot be local. That means suppose we have created two objects of this class, obj1 and obj2. So we have seen here in the instance variable concept that ob1 and ob2 will have two different values of this instance variable a. That's why this variable's name is instance variable. But whenever we are using a static keyword before it, it becomes a class variable, and the same value of a or the same instance of a will be shared by all the objects that we will create from this class. That means if we write a value here as 10, the value 10 that will go into obj1 will also go into obj2. So whatever value of A is there, the same value will be shared by each of the instances of this class C or each of the objects of this class C. But here in this case of instance variable, a different instance will be there in each of the a different instance of this instance variable will be there in each of the objects of this class. But here in this class variable, all the objects of this class will share the same instances of this class variable or static variable. So this is the main difference between instance variable and class variable or static variable. So these are the three main types of variables that are being used in Java. Apart from that, there is also a concept of reference variable that we will discuss when we will be discussing objects. Then we will discuss what is reference variable and how to use reference variables while using objects in Java programs. These are the three main types of variables: instance variable, class variable or static variable, and local variable. Now, in order to declare a variable, we need data types. So let's learn about data types. So these are the data types that are available in Java. Data types are mainly of two types in case of Java: primitive data type and non-primitive data type. Primitive data type is again divided into two categories: numeric data type and non-numeric data type. Numeric data type are of two types: integer types and floating point types. Integer types are of four types: byte, short, int, long. And there are two types under floating point types, which are float and double. There are two more types inside the non-numeric category, which are char and boolean. And these four are the non-primitive types. So let us discuss each one of them one by one. So let us first start with byte data type. Byte is the smallest integer type. Byte data type takes 8 bit in memory or 8 bits in memory or 1 byte in memory. This byte data type has a range from -128 to +127. Variables of type byte are especially useful when you are working with a stream of data from a network or a file. They are also useful when you are working with raw binary data that may not be directly compatible with Java's other built-in types. Byte variables can be declared by using byte keyword. For example, we can declare a byte variable like this. We can write byte variables like this. These are the byte variables declaration. The next one is short data type. Short is a signed 16-bit data type. 16 bits mean that it takes 2 bytes in memory. It has a range from -32768 to +32767. It is probably the least used Java data type. Now, how to declare a short data type variable? You can declare a short data type like this. The next data type is int. The most commonly used integer type data type is int. It is a signed 32-bit data type that has a range from -21474836648 to +21474836647. So it is a 32-bit data type. That means it takes 4 bytes in memory. In addition to other uses, variables of type int are commonly employed to control loops and to index arrays. Although you might think that using a byte or short data type would be more efficient than using an int in situations in which the larger range of an int is not needed, but this may not be the case. You will soon learn why is this the case. So the next integer type data type is long. Long is a signed 64-bit type and is useful for those occasions where an int type is not large enough to hold the desired value. The range of a long is quite large. This makes it useful when big whole numbers are needed. So long is a signed 64-bit data type. That means it takes 64 bits in memory or 8 bytes in memory. So you have seen that normal int data type takes 4 bytes in memory in case of Java, whereas in case of C language, if it is a 32-bit system, it takes 2 bytes in memory. If it is a 64-bit architecture, then it takes 4 bytes in memory. But in case of Java language, the primitive data type size is always fixed. It always takes 4 bytes in memory. Now these are the integer types. Now let's learn about the floating point types. Floating point numbers are also known as real numbers, and they are used when evaluating expressions that require fractional precision. For example, when we calculate something like square root, or when we calculate values of sine and cosine, these things result in a value whose precision requires a floating point type. Now, there are two kinds of floating point types, as you can see, float and double. So float represents single precision numbers and double represents double precision numbers. So let us first write how so these are the ways how integer and long variables can be declared. Now let us write how float variables can be declared. So this is how float variables can be declared. And this is how a double variable can be declared. Now let us learn about float data type in detail. I already told that the type float specifies a single precision value. It uses 32 bits of storage. 32 bits of storage means 4 bytes in memory. That means int data type and float data type both takes 4 bytes in memory in case of Java language. Single precision is faster on some processors and takes half as much space as double precision. Variables of type float are useful when you need a fractional component but don't require a large degree of precision. For example, float can be useful when representing dollars and cents. The next data type is double. Double precision, as denoted by the double keyword, uses 64 bits to store a value. Double precision is actually faster than single precision on some modern processors that have been optimized for high-speed mathematical calculations. All transcendental math functions such as sine, cosine, sqrt return double values in case of Java. When you need to maintain accuracy over many iterative calculations or are manipulating large valued numbers, double is the best choice. The next data type. So all the numeric type data types are being discussed. Now, the next data type that we will learn are of non-numeric type. The first non-numeric data type that we will learn is char. Now in Java, data type that is used to store character is called char. However, char in Java is not the same as char in C or C++ language. In C or C++, char is 8 bits wide, or it takes 1 byte in memory. But this is not the case in Java. Instead, Java uses Unicode to represent characters. We know that in case of C and C++ languages, they use ASCII character set or extended ASCII character set in order to represent characters. But Java uses Unicode to represent characters. Unicode defines a fully international character set that can represent all of the characters found in all the human languages. It is a unification of dozens of character sets such as Latin, Greek, Arabic, Hangul, and many more. At the time of Java's creation, Unicode required 16 bits. That's why in Java, char is a 16-bit type, and the range of char is 0 to 65536. There are no negative characters in Java. The standard set of characters known as ASCII still ranges from 0 to 127 as always, and the extended 8-bit character set ranges from 0 to 255. Since Java is designed to allow programs to be written for worldwide use, it makes sense that it would use Unicode to represent characters. Of course, the use of Unicode is somewhat inefficient for languages such as English, German, Spanish, or French, whose characters can easily be contained within 8 bits, but such is the price that must be paid for global portability. Now, in order to declare a char variable, we have to write it like this. So this is how we can declare a char variable. Now the next one is Boolean data type. So till now we have discussed about the data types that you have already learned in C language or C++ language. But a totally new data type that we will be learning now is Boolean. Boolean is a data type. It is a primitive data type in Java which is used for logical values. It can have only two possible values, true or false. This is the data type returned by all relational operators, as in the case of A less than B. We know that less than, greater than, less than equal to, greater than equal to, not equal to, these all are relational operators that you have already learned in C and C++ languages. These relational operators are valid in Java language also. Boolean is also the type required by the conditional expressions that govern the control statements such as if and for. So basically Boolean will give you only two values, true or false, and the outcome of a relational operator is always a Boolean value. Why? Let's see with an example. So this is a program that I have written by taking Boolean variables. So this is the class. The class is bool test. We have chosen this class name, but you can obviously choose the class name according to your choice that I have already told in the last class. Now this is the main method and this is the variable b. This b variable is declared to be as boolean. Now I already told you that how to declare a variable. The declaration type of a variable is same in case of Java language. It is same as that you have learned in C or C++ languages. So if you want to declare a variable in Java using Boolean data type, you can declare it like this. So this is how you can declare all the variables using all these types of data types in Java. So here in this program, we have declared a variable b as Boolean. Now we have set the value of b as false. Now we have printed the value of b. Now here there is a difference. The highlighted portion will give you the value of b on screen. Now you are already familiar with how to print some value on screen in C or C++ language. So let's suppose that we are displaying some value in case of C language. Suppose we have taken a variable int a equal to 10 in C language and we want to display it on screen. So we can do it like this, where this %d is known as format specifier, that we already know. But if you want to do it in Java language, you can do it like this. See that the variable declaration is same here also. The declaration and value assignment that you have learned in C language is there in Java language also. The same declaration type, the same value assignment type is there in Java language also. The only difference is that how you can show a value on screen. Here you have used printf function, and in case of Java you will be using the print method along with the system class and out object of the print stream class. If you want to show the value of a only without any statement along with it on screen, then you just have to write down the variable name, but not within double quotes, because if you write it within double quotes, then a will be shown. Whatever you write within double quotes, that particular statement will be shown on screen. If you want to show the value of the variable, then you have to write the variable name only without double quotes. If you write it within double quotes, then directly a will be shown. If you write it without double quotes, then the value of the variable a will be shown. So if you write it within double quotes, the output that you will get will be a. If you write it without double quotes, the output that you will be getting is 10. That means if you write it within double quotes, it becomes a statement or a string or a text that should be displayed on screen. But if you write it without double quotes, its value will be displayed on screen, which is 10. So we just want to display its value on screen. We don't want to display any other kind of text along with it. That's why we have just written here a. So this statement will give you the value 10. Now suppose you want to display it like the value of the variable a is 10. If you want to do it, then you can do it like this. I'm writing it here. So I'm running out of space. That's why I have written in 2 lines. When you will be writing, you have to write in a in one statement. So here we can see that system.out.println, we want to display the text as the value of the variable a is. That's why we have enclosed it within double quotes. We have enclosed this text within double quotes. And after this double quote, we want to display the value of the variable a. So we have written the name of the variable only. As you know that there is no concept of format specifier in Java. There is no concept of format specifier in Java. So we don't need to write any kind of format specifier in Java language. This kind of %d, %f, %s, %ld, these things which are known as format specifiers, these are not there in Java. So you don't need to write any format specifier. You just have to write the variable name. Now, what is the function of this plus sign? This plus sign will actually concatenate the value of the variable a after this text is. So what we want to do is that we want to display the text on screen as the value of the variable a is. And after this s, we want to display the value of the variable that is 10. That means the value of the variable a should be concatenated or appended after this word is. That appending or concatenation will be done by this plus operator. Here the plus operator is not doing any addition operation. Here the plus sign is concatenating the value of the variable a after this text. So in this case, if you print this value, the output would be the value of the variable a is 10. That means in this program, if you print this system.out.println B is, so this should give you, this should give you B is, after that there is a space, here there is a space, so this space will be printed and the value of B, which is false, will be appended because of this plus operator. Then we have set the value of B as true, because B is a Boolean variable, so you can easily set the value of B as true or false. Now we have set the value of B as true, so this statement will give you B is, after that a space will be printed and then it will give you true. Remember that if you give a space in between double quotes, that will be counted, but if you give space here or here, that will not be counted because it is written outside the double quotes. Now what we are doing, a Boolean value can control the if statement. How? Let's see. Now the value of B is true, so if B, now this thing we have already learned in C language. The if statement, the control statements, all the control statements, the decision making statements that you have learned in C language, all those things are also there in Java language. All the if blocks, all the if else statements, all the switch statements, all the control statements or the loop statements like while, do while, for, all those statements are also there in Java language. So you have already learned this thing. You have already learned that if I write like this, if x, sorry, suppose we have taken a variable x as 1. Now if I write if x, that will always be counted as a true condition because the value of x is 1 and 1 means true and 0 means false, that we know. So if I write if x, where the value of x is 1, this condition will be computed as a true condition. Similarly here, the value of B is set as true. So if I write if B, that means if true, that means the whole condition will be computed as a true condition. So as this is a true condition, it will enter into the if block and this system.out.println statement will be executed. So this is executed, this value or this statement will be printed on screen. So this will give you, this is executed. So the next output that you will get will be, this is executed. Now we have set B as false. So if I write if B, that means if false. If I write if false, that means the whole condition has been computed as a false condition. Now if it is a false condition, it will not enter into the loop. It will not enter into the if block. And so this is not executed. This part, this statement will not be printed on screen because this condition is false. So it will not enter into the if block. So this statement will not be executed. Now let's see how the outcome of a relational operator is a Boolean value. Now we know that greater than is a relational operator. So what we are computing here, whether 10 is greater than 9 or not. 10 is, yes, obviously greater than 9, we know that. So if I write it here, 10 greater than 9. If I write it here, 10 greater than 9, then internally it will be computed as a true value because 10 is obviously greater than 9. And if I write a plus sign, then the computed value of this portion will be true. So this value true will be concatenated after this text. That means this statement will give you 10 greater than 9 is a space, then it will give you true. Because this greater than is a relational operator and 10 greater than 9 is true, we know that yes, 10 is greater than 9. And we already told you that the outcome of a relational operator is a Boolean value. That means the outcome of this relational operator will be internally computed as a Boolean value, which is true. So the value true will be appended after this is using this plus operator. That means this statement 10 greater than 9 is a space will be printed on screen, and after that the value true which has come from this relational operator calculation will be appended after this space as we have used this plus operator. So let us compile this program and let us see what is the output of this program. So we have compiled the program and there are no errors. So let's execute the program. So see, this is the output that I have told you. The first one is B is false, the second one is B is true, the third one is this is executed, and the last one, which is the outcome of a relational operator, is 10 greater than 9 is true. Now let's come to the non-primitive data types. Now non-primitive data types are actually a different chapter, we can say. So each of these non-primitive data type is contained within a particular chapter. So we will be learning string data type in a string chapter. We will be learning array in a different topic. Most probably array will be in the next lecture. Class I have already discussed about class, but more I'll be discussing when I'll go into the object oriented concepts implemented using Java. And interface is a different chapter. So when we will learn those chapters, we will learn about these things in detail. So this is all about data types. So today we have learned some new data types that were not there in C or C++ languages. And we have learned how to declare a variable, how to assign some values into it. Now let's see how to initialize a variable. In order to initialize a variable, we know that initialization means while declaring the variable, we are giving some values into it. That is called initialization. This is called declaration. This is called declaration, just declaring the variable. This is called initialization because while declaration, we have given a value 100 into it. So this is called initialization. This is called variable declaration. And after some time, if we have to put some value into it like this is called value assignment. And to do value assignment, we need this equal to operator, which is known as assignment operator, which you have already learned in C language. This assignment operator is there in Java language also. Now you have already learned data types in Java. So let me tell you that Java is called a strongly typed language. So let's see what this means. First, every variable has a type that we have already seen. Every expression also has a type, and every type is strictly defined. And all assignments, whether explicit or via parameter passing in method calls, are checked for type compatibility. There is no automatic conversions of conflicting types as in some languages. The Java compiler checks all expressions and parameters to ensure that the types are compatible. Any type mismatches are errors that must be corrected before the compiler will finish compiling the class. These are the reasons why Java is called a strongly typed language. So in the next lectures, we will see how the operators are being used. We have already discussed two operators in today's lecture, the relational operator and assignment operator. We will see more operators that are being used in Java. You will find out that most of the operators you have already learned in C language. So we will go into the detail of the Java only operators. So thank you for listening to today's lecture. See you in the next lecture.